Hey, this is another video by Petrock, and today I'm working on my 06 Harley Night Train. It's an FX STBI, and today I'm going to be removing the front wheel in order to replace it. It's a pretty simple job. The service manual actually makes it sound a lot harder than it really is. For example, has you remove the front brake caliper. On this bike, at least, you don't have to. There may be other models where you do if the caliper goes inside the rim, but in this case you don't. One thing you do have to do is you have to put the bike up on a lift. Whenever you put a bike up on a lift, you want to make sure you put tie-down straps around it. I've seen too many stories online and videos of people who've lifted their bikes up and then all of a sudden had it fall down, and they have no idea how that could have possibly happened, because I guess they don't have gravity where they live. Anyway, so you want to make sure that your bike is properly secured, especially if you're going to be changing its center of gravity when you remove the front wheel. So this wheel only actually has 8,000 miles on it, but if you look closely, you can see a nice big bulge that's formed right here, and another one right in here. Maybe you can see it from this angle. See it right there? And there's a few others on the tire. So if you look at the bulge, you can see I can actually squeeze it with my finger. That's not good. This is a bad sign. It means that the tire, the outer shell, is actually separating from its inner carcass, and that's a blowout waiting to happen. This is why they always say that you should inspect your tires when you go out for a ride. As you can see, I lean pretty deep in my turns. There's literally like a 1/8 of an inch of chicken strip there. So I ride pretty hard, but I also ride every day, so I need to keep this bike up and running. So before you even pick up a wrench, you want to pick up some painter's tape and a Sharpie and write on it, or L and R. Now the reason for this is you need to mark the spacers right there and right there, and mark them and make sure you don't mix them up. They aren't the same size, but there really aren't any distinguishing marks on it to find out which one's which. So you need, in order to remember, I always put a little bit of tape with a right and a left on it in order for me to tell. So right and left is always in relation to you sitting on the bike. So this side's right and this side is left. Now if your bike is as dirty as mine, the tape may not stick that well. So you might want to wipe it down a little bit with some brake cleaner or something like that first before putting the tape down. So then you take a 3/4 socket and a breaker bar, because this nut is on pretty tight if you use the proper torque spec, and you loosen it. You can remove it all the way. It has a spring lock washer and a regular washer. Set those aside. Next you take a 1/2 inch socket and loosen these two nuts. You don't want to remove them. This plate here and these nuts obviously is what's holding the axle on this side. So you just want to loosen it a little bit in order to free up the axle. These shouldn't have too much torque on them. They should be fairly simple to get loose, if you don't drop your wrench. Next you want to place a floor jack underneath the tire. You don't want to lift it a lot. You just want to relieve the pressure off the axle so that you can remove the axle easier. That's it. Almost nothing. You don't want to lift the bike up too much, otherwise you could knock it off its jack. Next you want to take a metal rod or a Phillips head screwdriver and stick it in the hole right here, and then rotate it slightly so you can get a better grip on it. Then you just take that rod and pull. Now as you saw, both the spacers just rolled off into the ground, so that's another reason why you want to mark them so you know which side came from where. Now you just lower the jack and roll the tire out of the way. So while you have the axle off, you should also clean and inspect it. If the person who installed it last installed it correctly, there will be like anti-seize or some kind of a lubricant on here that you should wipe off. In the areas where the bearings are on the rim, you want to look for excessive wear marks. So in my case, it's right about here and right about here for my axle. If you have excessive wear marks where you can actually feel the peaks and valleys of the wear with your fingernail, then your axle is garbage. You need to replace it. What that means is that your bearings at some point got stuck and decided to spin against the axle rather than spin amongst the bearings inside the wheel bearing, and wore into the axle. So in addition to having your axle be garbage, you should also look into replacing your wheel bearings. So in my case, the axle is nice and smooth. There's no wear marks. These pieces right here are machined in from the factory, probably to balance the shaft. So in my case, the axle looks perfectly fine. It's a good idea to put the parts back onto the axle the way they came off, in the order they came off, so you don't forget. Unless you have a tire shop in your garage, it's going to be a little while before you put this thing back on, so you don't want to forget where everything went. So you put the right spacer on, then you put the left spacer on, then you put the washer, then you put the spring washer, and then you put the nut. And then set it aside and go get your tire changed. While it's in this state, you want to make sure you don't touch the front brake. Otherwise you'll compress the caliper. It'll make it harder to get the tire back on when you're done. So through the magic of video editing, I have a new tire on my rim. So before installing it, one thing you want to do is you want to check your rotor. Roll the tire a couple times to make sure there's no excessive run out on the rotor. If your rotor's warped, it'll cause some pulsation in the brake when you're trying to apply the brakes, or like cause the bike to jitter like that as you're trying to brake as well. Additionally, you want to check your wheel bearings and rotate them like that, and make sure that it's nice and fluid, there's no noise, and that there's no lateral movement. So if there is, then you have bad bearings and you should replace them. So before installing the tire, you need to apply a little bit of anti-seize to the axle shaft. This is for a couple reasons. One is to help prevent the axle shaft seizing to the bearings or the tube inside between the bearings when you're going down the road. You want those to be completely fluid. Additionally, it also helps for installation, so the axle slides in easier, and also for removal later on when the axle slides out. So you just take it apart, and you take a little dab of anti-seize and stick it on there. About that much. You don't need a whole lot. You want the anti-seize to cover from this point to this point. You don't want it out here, you definitely don't want it on the threads, and you don't want it out here. The area here and the area here is what goes through the fork sliders. The area in here is what goes into the rim. So you take the anti-seize and you just spread it out. A little bit of this stuff goes a long way. And that's it. Now just wipe your finger off and set the axle aside for installation. You roll your rim with its new tire in between the forks. You roll the jack underneath it, like that. Slide it into place. Now you don't actually have to use the jack. You can just muscle it up yourself if you choose. I just find using the jack a lot easier, so you don't have to sit there and fiddle with it while you're trying to get the axle through the hole here, through a spacer, through the wheel, through the other spacer, and through the other side. Having the wheel up on a jack just makes it so much easier. Slide the rotor in between the brake pads, raise up the wheel so it's in line. Now you take your axle and your right spacer and put it through the hole, through the other side, then stick the left spacer on the other side. Push the axle through. Like that. Now you can remove the jack. And you take the solid washer, put it through. The spring washer, put it through. And then put the nut on finger tight. Make sure not to cross thread this, because if you cross thread it, then you're probably just going to have to replace the axle shaft. And because it's a Harley, they're not cheap. Next you want to tighten up the axle nut. So you take a thick Phillips screwdriver, stick it through the hole in the side of the axle, and then you take your torque wrench and you torque it down to between 50 and 55 foot-pounds. I usually half that, so I take it at 52 and a half. So next you move over to the right side and you want to snug these nuts up evenly. The key is to get them on even. And then you torque them down with a 1/2 inch socket to between 11 and 15 foot-pounds. So I'm going to be using 13. You still want to do it evenly. So next you want to spin the tire a couple times and look for any oil or grease or even the lube that the tire shop used to install the tire, and you want to remove it. So you just take a rag or a paper towel with some brake cleaner on it, and you just wipe off any areas that look suspect. So next you want to apply the brakes, spin the tire and apply the brakes a couple times to reseat the brake pads against the rotor, and you're pretty much done. So I hope this video helped you out. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please leave them in the comment section below. If you like this video, please click the thumbs up button. If you want to see more videos like it, please subscribe.